Welcome to another Engineer IT panel discussion, and we're going to talk about artificial intelligence in business, balancing the risk and also the rewards. And I'm going to ask the two participants today to introduce themselves, and we start with Arch.
Sure. Thanks, Hans. So my name is Archana Rakal, or you can call me Archie, whichever is easier. I am the practice lead for the Intelligent Data Division within Synthesis. So just a little bit about my company and what it is that we actually do. We are one of the premier partners for AWS within the Sub-Saharan region, which means that AWS is generally our bread and butter. And we are seen as the experts within that space. But specifically around what it is that the Intelligent Data Division does is we make the artificial intelligence dream a reality with actual means. So from the data engineering space all the way into the actual infrastructure build, we take our clients as well as our customers on a journey to make the artificial intelligence a reality. So that's us in a quick nutshell.
Hans, great to be here again, and thank you for the opportunity. Also lovely to see Archie. We've had a few interactions in the past. So I work for PwC in the automation space, so RPA, intelligent automation, AI, and so forth. But I officially represent today the IIT PSA, which is the Institute of Information Technology Professionals South Africa, where I chair the special interest group on AI and robotics. I also write regularly, weekly for Business Day and for publications like FinWeek and Brainstorm and ITWeb and others. And I was recently appointed on it's a voluntary part-time role as research fellow at the School of Data Science and Computational Thinking at the University of Stellenbosch.
So the question then is, if we talk about artificial intelligence in business, maybe before we talk about balancing risks versus a reward, AI intelligence in business, is there a risk? Let's start, Johan.
Hans, there's a huge amount of rewards, but there are many, many risks, and I think many business leaders are not aware of all of these risks. So the answer is yes, and I guess we're going to go into what those risks are, but there are definitely risks, I think.
Would you like to, do you agree with that, Archie? And if you do, tell us a bit more how you see what risks there are.
Definitely, I have to agree with that. There's, with every good thing, there is a bad that is accompanied. And similar with AI, there is risk definitely involved, and it has to do more from an organizational perspective. But something I do have to mention is, just with any sort of digital transformation, AI brings the same sort of risks that any sort of digital transformation would bring to an organization. So it's not AI specific, I think, the risks that are involved. It's more just any sort of change in trying to make an organization better. It's the same sort of risk that AI would have as well. Maybe I can dive into a little bit more detail around what sort of organizational risks that are involved. Let's start off with just a basic technical infrastructure build. There are obviously going to be risks when you are introducing a new way of thinking, a new way of actually adopting the technology, which means that people need to be upskilled, people need to be well aware of the new ways of working, and the risk in that case is not necessarily following the new ways of working and not really being able to meet up to that standard that is necessary. That's one of the risks. There are a few others, but definitely on the other spectrum, there are rewards that come up when you are introducing these sort of new technologies as well.
Johan, do you agree with that? And are there other risks that perhaps Archie hasn't mentioned?
Yeah, and look, Archie and I look at it from different angles. She's definitely much smarter than me, especially technically, where I focus more on the business consulting side. And not that I say you don't do that, Archie, but I also have a great interest in the societal and the people impact. So I think, and then I fully agree with Archie, I mean, this technology will have the same impacts like any new kind of initiative in a business. I think what is different is just the power of this technology. I read a quote the other day, and I cannot remember who said this, but he said we are like children playing with a box that makes a ticking sound, shaking it around, so it could be a bomb. But if it is a technology first initiative, then we do typically leave people behind. I think a lot of organizations let the technology department drive these initiatives, which is not a bad thing. But things like culture, Archie mentioned ways of working. I mean, it could potentially transform the whole way the business operates. When we talk about automation, there's the jobs displacements topic. What do we do with all our people as we work smarter through technology, and we might not need those people anymore? Especially in our country, where, I don't know the numbers, but I assume on average, every wage earner looks after 6 or 7 other people, extended family members and the like. So even though it's legally difficult, especially in unionized, regulated environments like banking, there's a huge ethical part to this technology. There are other risks, but I think I'll maybe just pause there for now and see what else Archie has to say, or other questions you may have, Hans.
Well, it's always said that, and those that are promoting AI always say, well, yes, we will maybe losing some jobs, but we are creating many more new jobs. This is the question of companies must reskill, Archie.
Yeah. So, and I have a similar sort of gripe around, yes, we do need to reskill more people into working with this new technology, but are we 100% sure that people are following this? I think that's kind of where I've seen a huge gap in that space specifically, because there is a technology first approach that, as Johan mentioned, there is a technology first approach that is taken a lot of the time, and the people angle is being left behind. And I think as much as we do say that, yes, AI is also bringing the opportunity to get people more upskilled in different areas and domains, there isn't a formal way or a process that is actually being implemented, I think, in the grander scheme of things to ensure that this is actually happening. So I think we need to be more deliberate around that. When we are introducing these new technology stacks, we do need to be very deliberate about ensuring people aren't being left behind as well, which I've seen a gap in that space so far.
No, if I can add there, it's absolutely true what Archie is saying. The trick is, how do you upskill these people? We for the first time in human history, we are undergoing a so-called industrial revolution, where unlike the previous 3, we cannot efficiently and quickly enough skill people up. I mean, it was one thing to take horse cart riders or drivers and make them train drivers, for instance. And I like the work of Noah Yuval Harari, who wrote *Sapiens* and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century and Homo Deus and the like. He talks about the fear that we might create what he calls a useless society. And with that, he means that we are automating so fast, and it's so difficult for people to upskill that we might leave a large part of our population on Earth behind. And it's also no longer a fact of pivot your career and upskill. We have to continually upskill as we go. So that whole people plan of an organization, that's why I say your human capital management team should be very intimately involved in these initiatives. There could be, most likely, there always are star employees that have just never been given an opportunity. So they might really rise to the top. But what do you do with somebody who's been doing data capturing for 30 years or 20 years? What do we do now? And the other thing is, a topic I often speak about, is taking the robot out of the human. We fear the so-called robots, which a lot of people think it's industrial robots walking down the aisle coming to sit at my desk, but obviously it's software. But we are already robots, because a lot of people are just doing those routine tasks. Some people like it, but I think there's so much more in humans when it comes to empathy, when it comes to problem solving. That's why when I normally do an automation initiative, if the client comes to me and say their primary reason is the so-called FTE reduction, in other words, the business case is we're going to get rid of 10% of our people. Ethically, I don't want to do it. And secondly, it is stupid, because I often say, but don't you plan for growth? And an example I use is, say you've got 100 people right now, and the business case is that through automation and efficiencies, we actually only need 80 to do the work that 100 people are doing. But then I say to that business leader, but what is your growth plans? So to turn it around is to rather say, in a year from now, I might need 150 people, but through efficiencies and automation, we're going to upskill the current 100, we're going to keep them in their jobs, and that is the business case. But how do we upskill our people in this smart technology era is a very, very difficult, complex topic that I don't think many organizations are getting right.
I think you're absolutely right what you say. It always reminds me of companies that have gone under. And then if you really want to find out why, then they say, well, and no offense, put an accountant in charge. You'll cut down your headcount. You will cut down your headcount. You will maximize the profits. And next time you see, you have no company. And we've seen this in practice. I know that accountants don't like any of us saying that. But isn't that where the problem is? Isn't that what you've addressed? We are not seriously enough about training our people. And I don't think the point is we should not wait until the point comes where AI is going to do another task, and then all of a sudden we have these 100 people that we haven't got jobs for, because that means we didn't really plan, we didn't manage our business. So isn't the real answer then that companies should actually carry on upskilling all the time?
True.
Definitely.
And how do we engage people in doing that?
So something I can speak to. I've seen we've worked with a lot of financial services. There's a lot of divisions that have been pushing upskilling in the AI space. But what we've seen is when trying to push those agendas, not a lot of people are able to upskill fast enough. And it comes down to a point then it's like, should we actually just build AI and get people to upskill to that point? Or should we build AI in conjunction with the skill sets we have and augment AI with the existing skill set? So kind of as opposed to just upskilling people to become all, AI specialists, can we not change the roles that we have currently and make them more smarter by utilizing AI solutions rather? So that's a different approach that I'm seeing more fruitful at the moment, as opposed to trying to get everyone to a finishing goal rather.
On that, AI to technology, because when we say AI, it obviously includes a whole lot of technologies. It is definitely becoming smarter day by day, but it's not really as smart as a lot of people think it is. Not yet. There's a lot that it cannot do. For now, it's typically that, as I mentioned, those rote, repetitive kind of tasks. Also things like obviously looking at massive data sets, seeing patterns. Now, that's difficult for us humans to do. But there's a lot that it can't do. And I think what often happens is you have a consulting firm speaking with the CIO or the CEO, coming up with all kinds of shiny presentations. And the problem is that these decisions are made only at that level. And to give you an example, about 2 years ago, I did some work with one of the big hospital groups here in South Africa. And they wanted to automate their whole process from patients booking to come and see a doctor or coming in for a consultation or operation. Obviously, walking into the front desk, and where we know there's a lot of paperwork, and especially if you're in pain, you need to see somebody now. But that whole front desk staff was not at all included in any of the discussions. So somebody at the top was drawing pictures on a whiteboard, and I said to them, but have you actually spoken to any of these people whose jobs will be primarily impacted? Because on the one hand, you risk, and we, when it comes to our livelihood and our safety as humans, we will resist with pitchforks and storm the castle, But how do you get people excited about this change? So, the other thing I said is, if we don't speak with the people who will be primarily impacted, we will miss a lot of things that they deal with on a day-to-day basis that we don't even know, because we're 5 levels above them and we sit on this little corporate ivory tower. So luckily then we actually started interviewing these people. We firstly made them understand what this technology technology is and is not, which made them a bit more comfortable with it. People started almost venting. It's almost like that Undercover Boss TV program, where what will help people. There are sometimes simple things. For instance, what these people said is when a patient walks to us, we have to access 4 or 5 different systems, copy and paste information between it. We don't always have the information in front of us. So and this is not even AI. This is just automation to fix that problem. It is dashboards. And when people started seeing they actually start loving their jobs. It doesn't take that long anymore, etc. And then you start on this journey. That's the way to do it. Unfortunately, this almost never happens. And that is one of the risks as well, that you will not take. It's not just about, hopefully we won't lose people because they fear losing their jobs. There's knowledge and experience in these people that we need in these initiatives. I say a lot now and I can go on forever, but I'm going to pause. But it's important stuff,
I agree with you, but let's change a little bit of focus and let's talk about artificial intelligence and what rewards will it hold for business?
Basically, if I am to talk about the rewards, it's basically like any sort of digital transformation journey that an organization would entail. It definitely improves the processes. It makes, I guess, the existing jobs more successful, and there's less of a human error rate. There's quite a few angles that we can take, but I think maybe just to kind of show you from an actual stat around something that has actually worked. So there was a project that I had to deploy in the mining sector, about 3 years ago, where the business case that they had at that point was there was a high fatality rate that was occurring within the mining sector because all these miners that would have to go underground wasn't necessarily in the healthiest state, and there was a lot of debris in the ground, etc. So there was a huge fatality rate. We implemented a solution that actually leveraged off a lot of the AI services. There's quite a few components. There's reinforcement learning, computer vision, a whole bunch of different services. And what we found was there was a 67% reduction in the fatality rate just by implementing that one pilot. And it wasn't even the full solution yet at that point. So, that's just one use case. There's several more use cases, and that was a very complex solution. There are other simpler solutions, as Johan mentioned, around automation, which can already create such a huge impact from a system process, just simplifying a lot of the existing processes, allowing people to actually focus on their jobs and take on more than they actually are currently able to take on. So there's quite a few angles. I guess efficiency is the biggest one, but I think also from a people perspective, people do enjoy their jobs more when they're working with technology that isn't taxing as well at the end of the day.
I like that example that Archie mentioned, because it's one thing to make more money for the business. It's another thing when it impacts people's lives. So more people don't die, more people are safe. We also need to think of the environments we work in, like a mine. If you think of the environmental impact on the groundwater, the air quality, the communities living around the mine, there's a lot of solutions around that. But I think from my side, Hans, it's on the one hand, there's a lot of so-called back office advantages, so efficiencies, bringing down operational costs, and the like. But I think more and more in the so-called front office, we harvest up more and more data from our customers. We need to do it responsibly. We need to do it with regards to GDPR and POPIA, so from a privacy point of view. But from a customer service point of view, and utilizing the data we have on our clients, which will increase market share, customer happiness, and so forth. That's a huge aspect of it. More and more, I see platforms that uses behavioral science and predictive analytics to look at all the data they have on their clients. A good example is, your mobile phone providers. I always say that my mobile phone provider know more about me than any other organization, including my bank. They know more about me than anyone I know, and they know more about me than I know about myself, because they know exactly where I am and when, which is geospatial data. They know what kind of websites I serve, what kind of applications I use. They know who I associate with, especially if the person is on that same network. And through harvesting and interpreting the data on my behavior, they can serve me better. Now, a mobile phone company typically harvests about 800 to 900 data points on every customer. I mean, it's huge. So say you've got 30 million customers like our biggest mobile network in our country has. Without this technology, you won't be able to interpret it. Now, let me give you a use case, which is maybe a kind of a silly example. But say you want to market products to young new mothers or to new mothers as an example. And you look at who are the females of typical childbearing age. So, I mean, I'm a guy, what do I know? But say 18 to 35 as an example, who live in certain areas where you've got those products available. But if that female in that age range suddenly starts using her phone in a different way than she's done before. So much earlier in the morning, much later at night, intermittently during the night. One of the behavioral analytics to consider is maybe that's a new mother, as an example, but you have to take various data points. So what we can know about our clients is incredible with this technology. Also, it will show us things that our clients need that we didn't know they need, which helps us with the business case to develop new products and services. So the advantages are huge, and all organizations should be on this journey, but carefully, because we're going to get to some more of the doomsday stuff later, I'm sure.
If I could just add on that point as well. So, I mean, what Johan's saying is that's exactly what we need, right? Being able to harvest the big data that a lot of these companies are actually looking at and actually make more sense out of it than we currently are doing. But I think even from a custom expectation perspective, this is what people expect us to do. A lot of customers actually just generally say, but you have my data, why can't you make more sense out of it? That is the expectation. So we actually can't shy away from looking at more in-depth models that can understand human behavior and behaviorals around the actual customer themselves as well. So I think it is an expectation from the era that we're in anyways.
Yeah, I guess one of the problems that with AI, they have all this information and they're not maybe are really not using it correctly or efficiently at this point in time. And of course, AI could actually solve that problem. The one problem that seems to always exist, even you take a cell phone company or a bank, if you contact them, they ask you a zillion questions to actually verify that you are you. And that's still where the big gap is. They should be able to verify that I am who I say I am without having to ask who was my mother and when did I bank last and when did I, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they ask you so many questions. Don't you see that as something that we're not paying enough attention to?
Yeah, I'll go first. Hans, that's true. Look, I think there are regulatory requirements around privacy, and this is where biometric technology comes in, whether it's your phone that scans your face, like a lot of our smartphones can do to verify you are who you say you are, voice biometrics, and maybe one or two questions. So typically it would be ID number, who do you bank with, but there should be 3 questions, and that's it. But the point I think that we're making here is that my provider already has so much information on me. It should not only be able to preempt the most probable reason why I'm calling, but it should call me with things that I need that I didn't know they offer and that I clearly need. I mean, we all hate being contacted by call centers, and I always feel so sorry for those poor call center agents. Imagine you have to make 200 or 300 calls a day. I mean, at the beginning of this year, I had a lot from insurance companies or gym memberships or mobile phone companies, and these people call you with they essentially get a whole list of numbers and your name. They've got no idea. Yeah. So if there's a bit of context behind it, that will make me go, oh, well, that is actually interesting. I will listen to what you have to say. The call center agent will enjoy his or her job so much more. I would want to take that call. And I want to just give a quick example of what happened recently. My network fiber line was down. And because I work mostly from home, that's like walking to your car in the morning and you've got a flat tire to go to work. I mean, and that just ruins your whole day. My provider has only got a WhatsApp chatbot. I'm very pro chatbots as long as they work. But the chatbot kept on asking me things that they should know. So yes, there was an initial verification. Then it said, do you have a fiber line, an LTE line, or I can't remember what else? And I'm thinking, because when I sent my first WhatsApp, it greeted me by name. So it recognized me. But now why ask me which product I have? You should already have it. Then it asked me, is there an outage in your area? How must I know? Then it connected me to another website link to check if there's an outage in my area. And then we went through all the problem solving. Eventually, so I've spent about 2 hours on this chatbot. Obviously, now I want to throw my phone through the window. So eventually, they transfer me to a human who was totally in the blind, because that human had no data of what I've just shared with the bot. So he asked me all the same stuff again. So just to conclude, maybe in this example, so I send a WhatsApp. This is what I would have loved. And they said, hello, Johan, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. Quick ID verification. And then it says, we've picked up that you don't have internet access. Just give us a minute. Comes back to me, say, okay, there's no outage in your area. It's most likely your router, one or two. So in other words, be preemptive. Yeah. I would have loved that interaction, but that one took me 3 hours. I hated it. So I don't want to speak to a chatbot. I want to speak to a human, and I think a lot of people feel like that.
Yeah, but chatbots, I mean, generally are so underdeveloped. They, people should actually do their homework before they actually expose a customer to a chat box. Because, sometimes I'll just put my phone down and try again something else, because you're just wasting your time, because it never understands the question you're asking. Because the people that actually wrote that software don't really understand enough about what the customer would be asking. So
I would be keen to, actually, from Archie, if you don't mind, Hans, because I think she's closer, especially technically, to this stuff, because it's contextual, it's sentiment analysis and the rest. A lot of chatbots are what I call a glorified FAQ. So, but it doesn't, because often I have a problem and I can explain to you the pain, but it doesn't mean you're going to understand what I mean. Next, and then I'm going to ask Archie, because I'm sure she's got a lot to say about this, because how they implement this stuff. So, for instance, if I WhatsApp my restaurant bot, the question might be, what time do you open? And then it'll just give me a standard reply. We open at 7 o'clock on weekdays, and so forth, and so forth. But imagine it's got my data and it says, hello, Johan, we open at 7. We realize you normally order bacon and eggs. Tell us what time you want to be here, and we'll have your breakfast ready for you. That's conversational AI, not a chatbot. But Archie, you are in the trenches with this stuff, I think. So I'd be keen to hear what. A lot of dumb bots out there, but can it be smarter?
There's so many. It definitely can be smarter. And this is kind of like in the introduction, the reason why I mentioned data engineering is kind of like the way we tackle AI projects is you start off with data engineering and that transitions into AI. So I want to give a clear distinction between when we're talking about AI, there is a foundational element that needs to be put in place, which is a lot of the time, and I think this goes back to consulting companies come and show a presentation and don't necessarily show what all the foundational pieces that need to be in place before you can actually really leverage off chatbots as an example. And the reason why chatbots are failing to meet those expectations is because of that exact reason. The foundational elements are not there, and they need to be built up, right? So typically, the reason why a lot of the chatbots are not functioning is because the foundational pieces are not there. They aren't data, which is quite a scary thought, right? So you would assume that when your data is being given to an organization, that it would be, packaged in a nice place. It's actually being extracted and being kept safe. From experience, that's not what's actually happening in the back end, right? So what ends up happening when me personally, when I have to go and build an AI solution, I have to start from ground zero. Build up the database according to scratch. And only once that is in place, can we really use chatbots, I'm going back to the chatbot example, to its full capability. So that exact example of, if we could have just gone to the chatbot, said who you are, and then based on your geolocation, it could have automatically identified what's wrong with your particular fiber line. That could only be possible if that foundational database was there and if the data was being collected correctly from scratch, right? So that's actually what's happening, and which leads me to my next point around, we want to build all these AI solutions, but there isn't necessarily. It feels like AI is running in one direction. So there's all these algorithms and all these different new technologies coming specifically for AI, but the foundational element isn't necessarily leading up with it. So the whole, for lack of a better way of saying, the data-driven angle isn't actually being implemented the way it should be implemented when putting AI solutions in place, which is kind of a disservice for AI, because now we think it's AI's fault. But in reality, it's because the foundational elements aren't there in place as well.
The other question is that's maybe very important before we end off, and that is, should AI be regulated? There was an interesting argument that raged for quite a few years between Elon Musk and Steve Jobs when he was still alive, bless his soul. Elon Musk was very adamant that there needs to be some sort of regulation on AI. And Steve Jobs was totally opposite, and he used to argue about it, no. So my question to you is, should there be some regulation on AI, or should it just be allowed to go wild? Johan?
Go, Johan.
It doesn't matter. The nice thing about answering second is Archie will say all the smart things and I can just comment on that. But look, I think the balance we always have is between regulation and innovation, especially in the banking world. I mean, post 2007, 2008, with the nonsense we had then, there's a lot more regulation in banking, and for a good reason. But it's so regulated that it's difficult for the banking industry often to really innovate. And finding that balance is difficult. I just say, look, we are creating the most powerful technology we've ever had as humankind. It certainly will have to be regulated. It's impacting every aspect of our lives, and it will be more and more so. And in the very near future, we're going to start getting to the brain-computer interface. Elon Musk, his Neuralink this year aims to implant the first probe in a human. They've done tests on animals, baboons and the like. The potential health benefits for people with brain injuries, with Alzheimer's and the like is immense. The potential privacy issues is immense. It's an Orwellian world in a way that we can create. A lot more of companies I deal with these days speak about responsible AI. It's almost now, and it should be a board level initiative. It's because a big topic is biases in our data, not just in our operational data, but in the way we deal with our clients. We know that facial recognition, for instance, is a huge problem when it comes to recognizing female faces and people with darker skin tones. We've seen a lot of wrongful arrests in the US. Was it a year or two ago? Companies like IBM and others even started rolling back on this technology. But if I need credit from my bank, and I am exactly on the same credit-worthy level as Archie, for instance, but I just live on the wrong side of the track, or because of my gender or my ethnicity or whatever, I don't get the same access to credit, or I get a higher interest rate because of what the algorithms are doing with my data. But now let's bring it to healthcare, because we are going to get more and more healthcare services provided through this technology. So it's one thing if the bank gives me 1% too much on a loan and I go somewhere else. But if I desperately need healthcare for my son, so say the algorithm decides, based on the severity of the sickness of injury, how to schedule you with your doctor or your hospital. But he's only scheduled for tomorrow because of some sort of bias. So I think the point I'm making, this stuff we're talking about today, is a lot more closer to the skin than any other technology, because it impacts me, my health, the implants, the future of what it means to be human, our consciousness and the like. It should be regulated. And I would say if there's a middle ground between innovation and regulation, given what this technology can do, I would rather it lean a little bit more to regulation than innovation. I don't know, Archie, what do you think?
Definitely, AI should be regulated, but I want to add a caveat to this, because regulation for the sake of regulation is essentially what we're going down right now. And I've seen it with data. I've seen it like GDPR, POPIA, all these things have really assisted from a data privacy perspective. But what are we actually regulating in that case? So as an example, I'm going to start off with data and then I'll get to the AI regulation part. So if we start off with data privacy as an example, what is it that GDPR is actually telling us to do? They're telling us that we need to, marketers need to let us know that they have our data on their database. They need to give us the option to unsubscribe, etc. But what I'm finding with a lot of people is they don't care anymore. They don't actually care. They just said, fine, take my data. I want to see what my recommendations are. But they're not necessarily understanding that the reason why this is becoming a reality is because you don't have control over where your data is going. You have no control over what the algorithms are actually deciding on, but people don't have visibility into what that other angle is. What is it that's happening with the data at the end of the day? So I definitely believe that AI should be regulated. And as Johan mentioned, there is the responsible AI angle. There is the explainability angle as well that you have to consider. But the people that are regulating it, I'm not 100% sure. I think not even just the people. I think as a world organization, I don't think we're 100% sure what it is that AI can actually do and the limitations we have, or to what extent it could go as well. So before regulation is put in place, I think we need to have a good understanding around what it is that AI is going to be used for, what we find is the ethical use of AI, what we find is the unethical use of AI, and who benefits at the end of the day. Because I think there's a huge jury on that as well at the end of the day. Like, who is actually, is it the people, the big corporates that should be benefiting? Is it the people that are actually utilizing the system? Who should actually be benefiting from that at the end of the day? And I don't think that question has been answered. And without having that question answered, how are we going to actually regulate AI at all? So there is a lot of homework, I think, that needs to be done before we even have the regulation topic around who gets to regulate this and what those regulations should be going forward.
I agree with what you're saying, but just think about this. There could be some rogue element that runs away and creates the third world war. I mean, we seem to be almost there having such a thing.
Touch wood.
Maybe it's the fourth one, but there's still that risk, and there's no ways we can limit that. So, yeah, I guess we could talk about that for a long time. But let's go back to the original point and saying there's a risk, but there's also a reward for business. How do we balance that? Sort of your last comment.
Cool. Okay, let me go first. Let me go first. So for me, I think the balance, and I've thought about this quite often, and I keep having like a lot of thoughts around what is right and what is wrong. And I don't think I am the jury on this either, but this is just based on what I've seen in the industry. I think the balance that we have to maintain between risk and reward comes down to people. Who is going to be benefiting at the end of the day? Is it, for example, if we're looking at an organization as an example, is it the customers that should be benefiting? Is it the employees that should be benefiting? We need to understand what the people impact is and whether that is actually something that we're comfortable with before we actually. So I think that's kind of the trigger or the lever that we have to use to figure out what the balance is between risk and reward. So far that's kind of the best angle I've found. Having people to kind of determine, or at least the impact it has on all the different people associated with the solution at the end of the day.
I cannot agree more with Archie. She took the words out of my mouth, really. It starts with people. The challenge from a business point of view is obviously shareholder pressure in a very competitive world. I mean, if I was the CEO or the MD of a company, it's easy to talk about this philosophically, which we should. But if I can squeeze another 0.1% revenue gain, and it might cause 10 jobs to go, the pressure to do that is immense. So how do we also put ourselves in the shoes of those business owners? And I think, Hans, you made the point earlier, that the longer term effect. So don't just look at hitting the numbers right now, which is unfortunately what organizations do, and understandably so. But where will you be as a business in a year or 5 years or so? It must start with the people in your business, But if we then take it out of the business realm to a societal realm and healthcare, as I mentioned, weaponization. I mean, we already have autonomous weapons. Who makes that final kill decision? So for now, the AI through the drone or whatever will give the soldier or the commander enough information to decide, yes, through facial recognition, that is the terrorist we're going after. But I think as humans, hopefully most of us, unless you're a psychopath or a tremendous narcissist, which is most likely most people on Earth in any case, but anyway, is when the human makes that decision to pull the trigger, it's a different way of thinking about it than just an autonomous weapon killing something or somebody rather. So look, we are what they call artificial narrow intelligence. When we get to the so-called general intelligence and later on super intelligence, who knows when that is. I think for now it's fairly easy to regulate it, or easier. But when, and Ansh, you use the word running amok or losing control, that is a very real probability in the future. When these systems create itself and we lose control of it, the source code, and so we can no longer reprogram this thing because it's just building itself. So I just think the message for me is that we should be a lot more serious about this topic and talk a lot more about this. It should be not just government, but society, business. We should work together. I'm an evangelist of sorts when it comes to this topic, because I see what's happening and I think of my son who's 8 right now. I think we are going to screw this up. And even though I'm an optimist, I think that as humanity, we are going to screw this technology up, lose control of it. Hopefully I'm dead by then, who knows? But we've got some serious things to do before that happens. And on that positive note.
Yeah, I guess, but let's be a bit more positive and let's just say, like I always say, a 10-second answer to a 20-second question. How long do you think, how many more years do you think it will take us until we get some sort of equilibrium that we be comfortable with AI?
Comfortable in a technology sense, or comfortable that we're ready to use AI as our next gen?
That we can use AI to the world's benefit, including people, obviously.
That's a difficult question. It's a very difficult question. I think there's a few steps that we need to address. If I'm to give a ballpark figure, I think even the next 5 years, we're still trying to figure out what it is that AI can do and what its limitations are, as well as getting people comfortable with not a Terminator around the corner, So 5 years we're still going to be figuring out what it is that AI can do and how we can actually start using it to our benefit. So I know in 5 years we won't be ready. Maybe 10 years is more idealistic. I'm not sure. But yeah, definitely we need more time to figure out what it is AI can do for us and how we can benefit from it.
Yeah, it's a crystal ball. I wanted to say, Archie, if we get this right, I'm going to come pick you up right now. Let's go to Monte Casino and play the machines, because I also have a kind of a 5 to 10 year thing in my head, Hans. Look, it depends on what happens. If more and more people on Earth see the real benefit to their day-to-day lives, I think the adoption and the comfort with this technology will increase. The opposite, the converse, is if we are victims of the biases, it impacts us negatively. We lose more and more control of our lives, our banking, our healthcare, and so forth. Then again, we will never become, because then it is an enemy to us. But it's got all the potential to be the best thing we've ever created for the future of our children. The next 5 to 10 years is key to which direction this technology is going to go.
Thank you very much for interesting discussion. It's such a sort of a vast subject we can talk about. The next one I'm going to talk about next time is the metaverse. And that's just as controversial right now as everything else. But once again, Archie, Johan, thank you very much.